Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Peak Human Project. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different from the first two because today I have a guest. And so my guest today is Michael Bann. Michael is a really good friend of mine, and he also happens to be a coach as well. And what makes Michael a little different from other coaches is that he really likes to integrate both holistic, traditional, physical therapy type of modalities and all of that kind of information into the fitness programs that he writes for his clients. He has a lot of experience with military and law enforcement personnel. He has conducted thousands and thousands of in-person assessments and worked with thousands of clients in order to help them push their performance just a little bit farther and, more importantly, keep them healthy along the way. Michael's a really smart guy, somebody that I look up to as sort of a mentor, although in the episode you'll actually learn that at one point in time I was kind of a mentor to him. So it's kind of come full circle for the both of us, and it's a pleasure to call him a friend, and I really hope that you guys enjoy listening to him talk and learning a little bit about how he does his assessments and how he thinks about fitness. So without further ado, please welcome my guest, Michael Bann. All right, man.
Are we recording right now?
I already started recording. But
sweet, we got bloopers.
Yeah, no, we got B-roll now.
Nice.
But dude, it's really crazy how, for me, like, we've known each other a while now. Obviously, I was a TA in anatomy and physiology. I was teaching anatomy lab, and then I remember you being a student. You were like, actually, I remember, as funny enough, like we had like a lab where we had to like test hand grip strength. Yeah. And you were like, dude, what did you get? Because he wanted to beat mine. Because I was a bigger guy then, so like I looked like I had some strength. But yeah, I think you did beat me because I'm not that strong anyways. But yeah, dude, and you were like had a passion for it, and you really wanted to do it. You ended up becoming a TA yourself. Yeah. We became colleagues in that sense. And then we kind of like lost touch because I went to grad school, and but then I remember like seeing you get, like, I was like, wow, Michael's killing it. He's working at this company called OPEX, and he's looks like he's got all these clients. He's doing what I want to do for a living. And so I remember reaching out to you, I think it was like 2016, and I was coming back home for like a little visit just after the semester had ended. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, Michael, I don't know if you remember me, like, I'm going to be back in town. Could I come by and shadow you for a day? And I was like, it was like a big deal to me because it was like, this is Michael Bann, and he's like, awesome. And you responded, you're like, yeah, man, let's do it. When are you coming in? And I did the shadowing thing with you, and ever since then I've been learning from you, man. It's been a cool journey, but now like it's a pleasure for me to have you on the podcast, to have you, call me a colleague, because it's like I never thought that would happen, but it's been awesome, dude.
I would say the same. I never would have thought. You know what I mean? Like I looked up to you when I was a student. Yeah. So it's we learn from each other for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how it is in this. I think that's how it should be in this business. Is like
should be.
I see a lot of people, a lot of coaches that are kind of afraid to learn from each other, or afraid that like if they show that they don't know something, that means they're a terrible coach, or that their clients are all going to fire them because they don't know what they're doing. In fact, I see it a lot when like people get injured, say, and they need somebody to help them with like rehab and stuff like that. And there's only so much you can do as an online coach, right? If I'm not there, or you're not there, you can give them some stuff, say, hey, try this, but then eventually you might need to refer to somebody else, which is kind of funny. There's like a line there between practitioner and coach. Like where does a coach's role end? Where does a practitioner's job begin, as far as like a physical therapist or something? Like, how do you navigate that with your clients?
I just recognize what my expertise is, and if it sits outside of my expertise, I just tell the client straight up, hey, this is out of my expertise. This is what I believe is happening. I need you to find somebody that understands these things. Mm-hmm. Or even if it's within my expertise, like neurodynamics, like I'm by no means a Dr. Barron
Sure.
You know, when it comes to neurodynamics or Michael Shacklock, but I understand enough to be like, yeah, like we need to do some stuff for your peripheral nervous system. Unfortunately, I can't do that from 10,000 miles away.
Right.
So you need to find somebody that understands this or has read this book, The Sensitive Nervous System by David Butler.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I usually approach it. But in terms of like practitioner versus coach, coaches are practitioners, just like physical therapists are practitioners. We're just working on a continuum. So I just think in terms of like, where do I sit on that continuum, and when do I have to send that to someone else to help them get further along on the continuum? I consider coaches practitioners 100%.
Yeah, I agree.
We are practicing a craft.
I think it's just like you said, there are different areas of expertise within the spectrum of being a practitioner.
Yeah.
I know how to build good strength programs. I know how to get people strong and stuff like that. That's almost a form of physical therapy. It's just that physical therapy is like on a more, lower level, getting people from pain to the first progression that they should be doing on to being able to do something that I give them, But have you ever like run into resistance with your clients? Like maybe people saying like, oh, well, shouldn't you be doing this for me or something like that?
All the time.
Yeah,
all the time. And less these days, because I think that my communication skills are probably a little bit better than when I was, in my first 8-9 years of this. But I definitely still struggle with that, where they're like, why can't you do that for me?
Yeah.
And, it kind of makes sense why clients might say that, because one, like they're already paying good money. Two, they may be in pain. And if they're in pain, like you're already in like a volatile emotional state, because you're like, my back hurts, coach. I can't deadlift, and I have a goal of hitting a 200 kilogram deadlift. Why can't you help me? Like they're going to get upset and they're going to be very frustrated because they can't do what they love.
Right.
So absolutely, people, kind of quote unquote lash out at me, and it just comes down to being like, hey, listen, like I totally get it. I know that you're in a hard spot right now. I promise you, this is a season of life. In the iron game, everybody tweaks their back at some point. Everybody gets a shoulder tweak at some point when you're trying to bench press big weight.
Right.
Trying to throw 3 wheels on the bar, you're gonna get a tweak.
Yeah.
And just trying to communicate with them and also show them that there's been numerous times that that's happened to me, and just being like, hey, like even me as a coach, like I'm the guy that's supposed to be like perfect, and I'm still getting tweaks here and there because I decided to go eat some fast food the day before, some Chipotle, and I don't sleep, and it accumulates, and next thing you know,
everything accumulates.
Boo! So it happens to me all the time.
I think that's a really good point, because I feel like there's also this growing, I guess, idea that you could prevent injury completely, and that you can get to a place where you never get hurt, and you're going to be feeling great all the time. And I think people in the know would tell you that, like you said, if you're lifting heavy weights and you're trying to maybe win powerlifting competitions or CrossFit competitions, or even just get strong as hell for yourself, that's a lot of weight to be putting on your body, in your hands, on your back.
It's Dr. Spina from FRC, he said it pretty well. He was like, lifting weights, fighting, MMA, whatever, that stuff is not human nature. That's not paleo.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to put 200 kilos on your spine and sit down.
Right.
I can maybe see an argument for lifting 200 kilos because you got to lift a carcass because, we hunt and kill food. But, when you take yourself out of the human element, there's a risk.
Yeah.
Totally. But, everybody dies. Not everyone lives.
Yeah. Before we get too much into the stuff, because we could talk about this forever, and all of a sudden it'll be 2 hours. I want you to be able to talk a little bit about you, where you came from, like how you got started. I know you have a master's degree in kinesiology, FDNP. You can explain that, like what that is.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead and give the listeners a little bit of an idea of who Michael Bann is.
The resident fitness nerd.
Yeah.
So the Aspie fitness nerd.
Yeah, there you go.
I guess I'm just a dude that likes solving puzzles in fitness. So, kind of like if you've ever seen, what's that show? House MD, right? Like
Dr. House.
Yeah, you go to Dr. House, not Ben House, but like Dr. House, the show. And you go to that. You go to his clinic and you're like, man, I got a fever and I got the sniffles.
Right.
And he's like, you have the flu. Get out of my office. That's not even a challenge.
Right.
And he's kind of an asshole about it, which I try not to be an asshole about it, but I love working with the people who are like, hey, I feel terrible. I love fitness, but I can't do the kind of fitness I love. And no one can tell me why. And I'm like, yeah, come to me. Let me figure this out. Let me assess this puzzle and let's dig in. I mean, what could it possibly be? So I have this like super deep infatuation with finding truth, and then trying to like figure out how to like put the dots together. So assessment is like my thing, and you know, we think of assessment as like, oh, you're going to assess movement, or oh, you're going to assess structural balance and biomechanics. Like, yeah, that's part of it, but also like assessing how well somebody tolerates glucose, or assessing gut health, or assessing kidney function, or all those things. All that stuff goes into fitness.
Sure.
So I mean, I went to grad school. Yeah, my graduate degree is in kinesiology. My concentration was in basically more or less human performance. Like, how do I make humans better? And throughout studying and reading all the research I had to read and writing papers and all that stuff that we do in grad school, I kind of realized, I was like, you know what? Like, there's a million and one ways to make people faster. But what is something that they're all doing the same? Because they all have different programs, but what are some of the things that they're doing the same? And I started to realize that there's more to performance enhancement than just program design. And then I started looking at injuries, and I really dug into pain science and injuries, because there's a lot of parallels in the biopsychosocial model of pain and the performance model of sport. And I started drawing from those parallels, and I became very obsessed with like the patterns. And so, you know, like me, like being on the spectrum, like Asperger's, like I'm very observant of patterns. And I think that the term I heard recently was called like, I think in terms of patternicity.
Okay.
So I would see patterns in the biopsychosocial model of pain, and I would see lots and lots of patterns in performance. And I started to draw from both of them for my assessment process. And I started to see like, oh wow, like chronic inflammation can cause a whole host of issues in the body over time. So what happens as we start to increase intensity? And throughout grad school, I started to realize that we really focus too much on the program design, which is fair. Like as new coaches, that's like what we want to learn, right? Like reps, sets, DUP, bro, or whatever. But then we forget that you may be only spending 6% of your week in the gym.
Yeah.
So what are we doing with the other 94%? What is your circadian biology like? What's your glucose tolerance like? What's your gut health like? What are your hormones like? You know, what is your oxygen delivery like? You know, do you have adequate hemoglobin and red blood cells? Can you actually deliver oxygen to your tissues? Or do you have some form of subclinical anemia that a doctor might be like, yeah, you look fine, but you know, for a couch potato, you are fine. Like your blood work looks great for a couch potato,
but not for an athlete.
Yeah, you want to sprint a 4.240. You can't look like a couch potato. Right. So I started to see a lot of those trends, or those patterns, I guess you would call it, in grad school, and I just became like really hyper focused on it. And then I started looking at like psychosomatic medicine, and I went down like the Dr. John Sarno route, talking about emotional repression, you know, eventually, you know, it being expressed as pain like fibromyalgia, and even more milder cases of that. And we started talking about psychosomatics and how there's a lot of parallels to that as there are to fitness. Like we'll use CrossFit as an example, double unders. You know, every CrossFitter knows what a double under is.
Sure.
I would have clients that could do double unders, 300 of them in a 3-minute AMRAP.
Wow.
Pretty much unbroken. Went out without any type of like emotional attachment. The second they had double unders in an open workout or any competition, they would trip all the time.
Yeah.
Like, why can you do it just in a warm up? Hey, just do a 3-minute AMRAP. All right, I did 300 unbroken, coach. All right, that's great. You hear the wind?
Yeah, the wind's crazy.
Yeah, man.
Got like a vortex in here.
My apartment's haunted. It's pretty cool.
That's
first time I heard that, it was like 1 a.m. Freaked me out. I was like, what is going on?
Dude, I'd be freaking out
It
big
was
time.
nuts. But yeah, so then they go into the open workout or a competition and they're tripping every 10 reps.
Yeah.
Like emotional attachment to things can change physiology and performance.
Right.
I mean, when Chandler walked down the aisle, did you not have a physiological reaction? Right?
Absolutely.
Like you tear up, you get butterflies.
Can't even help it.
Yeah. So I started thinking about that, and I was like, you know, we know that when we get like nervous, like stuff can happen to the gut. Like we have people that have like, you know, they get nervous and they have diarrhea.
Yeah.
Like, why can't you get nervous and have other stuff? Why
Right.
can't you get excited and have other stuff?
Yeah.
So I started digging into like chronic pain and how it had a lot of parallels with performance. And then where does pain come from? Is it mechanical? Is it movement? And I think for the first maybe 6-7 years of coaching, I really dug into the FMS. I was super obsessed with like movement is pain because I bought into the FMS crowd, and I really bought into that, like that dogma, if you want to call it that. And I did about 12,000 FMSs, maybe a little bit more, roughly around 12,000.
Wow.
And I collected a lot.
That's a lot, folks.
Yeah, I guess I would do about a couple hundred a month because I had access to that many people.
Yeah.
Because I was working in a gym and I would just FMS everybody.
Yeah.
And then I would give them their corrective exercises, and then I'd do it again in a month and see what changed. I was like, you're not getting any better. Why aren't
Not
you
getting any better within the context of that test. Right?
Yeah, like your screen, you're not getting better.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wait, I'm doing what these guys tell me to do, and these people
Right.
aren't getting better. So then I went and figured out, like I did all the SFMA coursework, and I went and did the SFMA, and I kind of like weaseled my way in because I'm not a doctor. And I just kind of like went, and they'll take your money, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
They don't care. So I did that, and I followed their framework, like the 4x4 matrix and all that, and people were still not getting better. And I was scoring a 21 at the time on the FMS, and I was chronically getting injured. I was always getting hurt. Like I had great movement, smart programming, and stuff would just get tweaked.
Yeah.
Like I tore my meniscus front squatting 50% of my one rep, nice and slow, just warming
Wow.
up.
Yeah.
50%, and it just tore.
It's kind of like when people say, when people hurt their back, it's usually like putting a weight back on the weight tree.
They lift
or
their
picking
toaster.
picking up their
Yeah.
kid off the ground, or something
Yeah.
like that. Meanwhile, they're deadlifting 600 pounds, no problem.
Exactly. And or like I was split jerking 225 pounds, and I like cracked a little bit of cartilage in my rib.
Wow.
And I could split jerk like 350 or whatever at the time. So like 225 is a joke, right?
Right.
And so I would always have these minor tweaks and sprains. And at the time, my coach was like, dude, why are you so fragile? I'm like, bro, I don't know. Like, I'm pretty mentally tough. Like, I like to push it. And so I started to realize there's more to this movement thing. And I think CrossFit really opened my eyes to that because I've done personal training, I've done CrossFit coaching, I've done a lot of individual design, obviously. And for my stint in group fitness, I would see people who moved terribly getting better and out of pain, and getting stronger and performing better, but not moving better based on a screen. That started not making sense to me. And thinking in patterns, I was like, that's I guess you would say incongruent. And I was like, that doesn't
Something
make sense.
doesn't add up.
Yeah, so I started really digging more into like other areas, and then eventually I heard about like some different mentors that became mentors of mine. But I heard of these people like Dr. Tom, for example.
Sure.
And Dr. Tom, who had been practicing, naturopathic medicine for 43 years or whatever, I started listening to him talk, and eventually he taught me a lot, and I'm forever grateful for even the little bit he did teach me. And I realized that pain is well beyond mechanics. And then in grad school, I read all the research on the FMS and how movement screens aren't validated to predict pain or injury in the first place.
Yeah.
So I don't believe you can have an injury prevention program, but I do believe you can have a resiliency enhancing program.
Yeah, I think it's a good point because, I mean, I forgot what book it was that I read. I'm forgetting the name right now, but they talked about monks, I believe, who have to carry these large loads on their back up and down a mountain every day. And they actually took these monks and they did an MRI, and it showed that they had herniations all over their spine.
Yep.
However, they had no pain whatsoever.
Yep.
So there's something more going on there, right?
Totally.
Whereas you can actually get somebody who with no significant findings on an MRI, no herniations, nothing looks wrong, they're in terrible pain.
Yep.
So where that's where it's like there's something else. There's a bigger picture going on. We're only looking at it through this small lens.
Yeah, and that's actually being a remote coach. A lot of my clients live in parts of the world where their medical professionals are not current on scientific literature. And it's not their fault. Like they didn't choose to be born and live there.
Right.
And so I have, like, for example, one client of mine who's in Saudi Arabia, and her doctor was like, oh yeah, you have this herniation, that's why your back hurts. I was like, no, like all the other tests you did that are required for specific sensitivity, not just sensitivity, or negative. Like you don't, your herniation is there. Yes, I know that you have a herniation, but it's not the cause of your pain.
Right.
But it's hard to get that through to the client's eyes when their doctor is like, yeah, you see you have back pain and you have this herniation. Like, yeah, it's your herniation.
Yeah.
Like the old school ortho surgeons, squatting is terrible for your knees. All of my patients squat and I have to replace all their knees. Maybe they're just not squatting right, doc.
Sure.
The ones that squat right don't come to you. So there's a level of like,
there's a little bit of bias there. Yeah, confirmation bias.
And so, 80 to 90% of the population will have something on an MRI.
Yeah.
But
it's like
they're not walking around.
I think by the time you reach like the age of 50, like chances are you have a torn rotator cuff.
Hopefully you've lived a little life.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're unscathed at 50 years old, shame on you for not living life.
Yeah.
Like I just had a hole in my knee because I fell off a scooter in Nusa Penida.
Yeah.
It was totally
it's a good point. Like I've got a client, Lane Norton, who, he's got disc herniations in his lower back. He still has them. If we put him through the MRI today, it would show up with herniations. I guarantee it. He just got back on the platform. He deadlifted a PR, all-time total PR. Still has the same herniations he had 2 years ago when he was literally on the floor, screaming in pain. He couldn't move.
Yeah.
But if you look at what's going on in his life back then, he had personal issues within his life. He had business issues going on. He was not sure if he's going to be able to pay his bills kind of thing. Like all this different stuff, probably not eating well, staying in a hotel, all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Back was telling him he can't handle this stuff anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, we can't discount the fact that you also can have back pain because of mechanical problems. Like, don't try and Jefferson curl 300 kilos.
Right.
Duh. But the state of somebody's like emotion can change the feeling of pain. So the experience of pain is massively important. Right. You stub your toe when you've only slept 3 hours, that's painful. Like you're just cursing up a storm. Yeah. You stub your toe as you walk up to collect $1 million check, whatever, I'll buy a new toe.
No problem.
Yeah. So emotional states change. Cortisol and hormonal issues can change and alter pain levels. I see a lot of my females with progesterone issues have chronic pain, and then that gets rectified and pain gone.
Yeah.
We see cortisol and substance P, which is something that has a lot to do with pain. Well, how do you get that? I don't know, man. Like chronic inflammation is one way, liver congestion, kidney function, so many ways. And, I think it's slowly coming around where PTs are starting to realize like, like chiropractic adjustments, not 3 times a week needed.
Yeah.
So it's slow.
So backing up a little bit, it sounds to me like you probably do, like as far as assessments goes, like are you looking at blood work? Are you looking at, like what kinds of markers are you looking at when you get somebody as far as what's going on under the hood?
So my assessment when I take on a client is always based on what they want. So a client's going to basically walk up, take my money. Yeah. I'm going to be like, all right, like what do you want? What do you want for your money? And so I always want to make sure that whatever I assess is pertinent towards the goals that they have.
Sure, you're not just going to run a shotgun approach to whatever you're doing and see what you find. It's going to be specific.
Yeah. So when clients come to me and they've had like chronic issues or they've just been stuck in fitness, I can think of one client actually, I won't say names for privacy, but she had massive amounts of shoulder pain and she was just in chronic pain. And I was like, this just doesn't make sense because she actually she's a clinician and she has a graduate degree and she rehabs people for a living. Like she understands mechanics quite well. And I talked to her and I was like, well, what have you done? She's like, well, I've done everything DNS and blah, 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 and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, all right, well, thank you for getting rid of that for me because that clearly wasn't the problem because if it was, it would have been fixed and you wouldn't be here. Yeah. So with her, we went down the blood work rabbit hole. And when I look at blood work, I'm not looking to treat disease. I'm not trying to be a doctor, right. Which is something that I'm very clear with clients. I'm like, hey, if I see red flags, like if your glucose is 150 fasting, I'm sending you to somebody that can help you with that. But I will look and I see a lot of patterns in the numbers. And there's things you can do training-wise as well as nutrition-wise to really help people. And honestly, in some cases, some supplements can be very beneficial. Yeah. So as an example, somebody comes to me chronically tired, they can't seem to break through plateaus. I look at a CBC with a differential, I notice low white blood cells, and I notice high monocytes, which macrophages eventually, but monocytes have this ability to leave the blood and go elsewhere. And there
into the tissues, you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and there's evidence that shows that monocytes will go into damaged muscle tissue and do their thing.
And what would they be doing there?
Repair.
Pretty
much, yeah.
So like repairing muscle damage.
Yeah,
okay.
pretty much. Yeah, you can clear out dead stuff.
Gotcha.
So think about, like, when we look at blood work, we always have to remember it's a snapshot in that exact moment,
Right.
and it's only what's in the blood.
Right.
So if monocytes, which are elevated in terms of the relative amount, so let's say 12%, then they're going to be leaving the blood to go somewhere else.
Right.
So your white blood cells will appear low.
Gotcha.
So it's a pattern I'll see in overtraining, and I'll say, hey, white blood cells are low, monocytes are high, you don't seem to have digestive issues, so I don't think they're going into the digestion. I think they're really going in because you're doing too many eccentric contractions.
Okay.
So I think what we need to do is we need to take away the eccentric contractions, and we need to give you more concentric, so there's less muscle damage, and I need to give you less reps, so that way there's less volume overall. Right. And then I'll look at like a CMP, and I'll look at sodium potassium ratios, and somewhere around 30 to 35 is a good ratio.
Gotcha.
So if I see somebody that's at like a 28, I can safely make the assumption that they're kind of burned out. Right. And you have to talk to the client, hey, what's going on?
Right,
so
right.
I see somebody that's like, yeah, I'm just not getting better. I'm tired. I struggle to wake up. I'm not hungry. And and I'm like, all right, well, it looks like you're doing too many eccentric contractions. And to be honest with you, your sodium potassium ratio is at 28, so it looks like you're burned out. Maybe we should just stop training for 3 weeks and help you calm down.
Yeah.
Let's help your digestion out, because digestion is super energy expensive, right? Yeah. Parietal cells take a lot of ATP.
Yeah.
So what if we just start supporting digestion? Digestion is a neuroendocrine process.
Right.
And that's something that I think a lot of nutritionists and coaches kind of sometimes might miss the boat on, because we think digestion is chewing your food and then digesting.
Yeah.
We know that digestion starts when we know food's on the way. We've done it with food porn. Like, I can look at a pizza commercial, Papa John's, and I can get an insulin spike all of a sudden because I'm just thinking about something good.
Well, because we're kind of like not evolved to see that kind of image all the time, right?
Yeah.
So if we see food, our understanding evolutionary is that food is available to eat right now.
Yeah. So let's start the digestive process.
Let's get it going.
So I'll alter people's habits. Maybe I'll give them some digestive enzymes. Like, I'll recommend some enzymes to support or whatever. But, we'd start talking about, hey, slow down before you eat. You want more stomach acid production? You need to be in rest and digest. You need acetylcholine, which is more of a rest and digest neurotransmitter in the gut. Take 10 deep breaths before you breathe or before you eat.
Yeah.
Great, awesome. Smell your food while you're doing that. Let your brain know it's on the way.
Yeah, and for those of you listening that might be thinking like, I don't know what he's talking about, maybe think about like contest prep clients, right? I've seen it over and over again, or heard it over and over again from clients, that as prep gets worse and worse for them, they spend more of their time on Instagram looking at food than anything else in their day. So there's something going on there mentally, right? Yeah. It's not just that they're hungry, but it's almost like they're satisfying some sort of urge to eat by just looking at the food.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a very big emotional connection to food. Food is very emotional.
Absolutely.
And it's very tough. And this is where, like, you think of the person that, lives in Mississippi and they won't give up their sweet tea.
Right.
It's like, well, yeah, because grandma used to make really good sweet tea, and that reminds you of a great childhood. And yeah, I wouldn't want to give up my good memories either. So there's an emotional connection, and I tell you to stop pressing the red button. All you're going to want to do is press the red button.
How do you go about doing that with your clients as far as the nutrition side goes, where you see clearly that maybe there's some gut issues, or maybe there's, food choices aren't perfectly where they need to be? How do you get them to buy into maybe say making the changes they need to make? Do you let them know that it's not a permanent thing, or perhaps it's not a permanent thing? One day maybe they can go back to enjoying some of those foods that they love so much, but right now it's pertinent to get some things repaired up front. How do you do that?
Yeah, I guess it really just depends on the person. Some clients are like, hey, tell me what I got to do and I'll do it, coach. Sure. And then some clients, they need to be more in charge of the decision-making process. And I've made that mistake. Even recently I made that mistake. I gave a client, what they needed, but that was too much. So did they need to do all these things? Absolutely. To get better and stronger and faster and they are an emergency responder. Like they need to be able to do this because lives are on the line.
Mm-hmm.
But that was too much for them to bite off. And so I made that mistake of like, here, do all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I backed up. I was like, hey, listen, client, I want you to tell me what you think you're ready for.
Right.
And I will give you a priority or a hierarchy of like needs based on that.
Let's start with this.
Yeah.
Let's get that down, go on to
Yeah.
the next thing. Yeah.
I sometimes even get so excited with this stuff because I'm so passionate that I might throw too much.
Right.
But as a general rule of thumb, I always ask for confirmation after I've written out a plan.
Got it.
So I say, hey, do me a favor. I've written out your next week of programming. Everything is up. How-to videos are up. Every explanation is up. All your percentages should be dialed in. Look it over. Let me know logistically if it makes sense. Let me know if timeline-wise it makes sense. Can you spend the amount of time in the gym? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then for like nutrition, like, can you do this? Like, do you really have the ability for a food scale or no? Or are you able to limit these foods, or can you add these foods, or whatever it is?
Whatever it is,
and I get them to go, yeah, Michael, I can do that. I'm pumped.
Okay.
Because there's a difference between, yeah, I can do that versus like, hell yeah, I really want to do that, coach.
Right.
And if I can get that hell yeah, I want to do that response, that's the plan I go with.
Right.
Even if it's not perfect.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think clients and I think coaches and clients suffer from the same thing when it comes to perfectionism. So a client feels like if they're not 100% adherent to the plan, then it's like, I might as well have just not done anything. Then they lose their mind and they go way off plan. And I think as coaches, we know the quote unquote perfect thing for the client. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it's like we forget that we might need to dial that back. 80% perfect is still better than not giving them anything.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, I think it's the tenets of evidence-based practice, man. So I hear there's a lot of like evidence-based coaching and evidence-based fitness and practice these days. And it's actually something that kind of annoys me because it's seemingly going into the like, well, there's no evidence for that, so you shouldn't do that.
Right.
It's like, okay, but like
there's no scientific study to prove that, bro.
Yeah, but like the first pilot didn't have a pilot's license.
Right.
So I'm not going to wait around for some researcher to finally get enough money to research what I've seen in the trenches 30,000 times. And do I need to know every bit of minutia about that? No, I do not.
Yeah.
But there is a level of like evidence where it's like, okay, like, you know, Dr. Philip Snell, like one of the most renowned back pain experts, like mechanical pain experts in the world. Mm-hmm. Great guy. If you ever have a chance to like just chat with him, like have him on your podcast. He is amazing, super cool. He likes good whiskey, so I really like him.
Yeah.
But he always said that like evidence-based practice is really standing on a platform of scientific data that's published and we know, or we think we know, but it always can be upgraded. But the real art of it comes from like reaching for something that's slightly out of grasp and just barely balancing on that platform. Yeah. So if we sit there and we're like, well, the data on gut health is inconclusive, so just eat what you want. Calories are the only thing that matter. That is one of the most dogmatic, unevolved perspectives, because there's enough data to stand on to be like, okay, like, do we know everything? Of course we don't. Will we ever know everything? Probably not. Right. But we do know that Taco Bell is not going to be as good as broccoli and salmon.
Right.
So I think of it like I'm reaching. Yeah. But then to the next point of that, evidence-based also is taking in the client's values.
Sure.
And so I need to know, like, what does my client really want? What do they value? And then how can I do whatever it is that I do to align with their values? And I have some clients. I have one client. I think I've done 5 consults with him in the last 6 years. I like my clients to do at least 1 consult a month with me.
Yeah.
He doesn't really care about doing them. He just sends me a message. Hey man, this week was great. Can we do it again? Yeah, if you want to do the exact same thing again, we can.
Yeah.
It's like, I do. All right, cool.
I think it takes us, I mean, it's certain, everybody's got a different personality within the client. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the same thing. You get some clients that message you every day. You get some clients who you don't hear from for a whole month, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, I'm doing good, by the way, just letting you know. And then you don't hear from them again for another month or 2.
Yeah.
And it's just like, individual natures within each person, and you kind of have to adapt the way. Because if I were to tell that person, hey dude, you need to send me check-ins every week, he's going to be like, that's too much for me. I don't need to hear from you every week, right? Yeah. And at the same time, if you treat the other people poorly, they're going to be like, I need more from you, right?
Yep.
So
I like to ask people what are their expectations?
Right. Yeah, that's one of the first questions I ask.
Yeah. Like, what is your expectation of me? Okay, great, awesome. By the way, this is how I operate. Are you okay with that?
Right.
Because I like to have my time off as well.
Right. Yeah.
And so I really am a huge fan of like clear boundaries.
Yeah.
And very good expectations.
I think that's something that maybe young coaches is something I fell into early on, is not setting those boundaries, because it can be really tempting to be up 10 o'clock at night. You're, sending text messages to 25 of your clients because they've just little by little taken more and more of your time. But you have to set that expectation up front, like, hey, you know what? You have a job where you have set hours. I'm trying to make my set hours as well. So if it's outside of those set hours, I'll get to you the next time I'm in the office, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, man. Boundaries and expectations. It's what's fair to clients, first of all.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have it, it's like dealing, I don't mean clients are like children, but it's like having a child that has no rules.
Right.
They don't have an opportunity to grow. There has to be something that confines them for growth.
Right.
So it's the only fair thing really for a client to let them know that.
Yeah. And it only just sets up an unrealistic or an unsustainable practice that eventually will fail, right? There's going to be a blow up where you're like, hey, I can't take this anymore.
Yep.
Or they're going to get angry about it, or whatever the case may be.
Coaches can become very, very resentful of their clients.
Yeah.
Because they didn't set boundaries. And when you have, I just had a consult with a client of mine today, another client of mine that's in Saudi as well, and they were just like, they're burned out. And I'm like, yeah, because you don't take yourself seriously enough as a coach.
Yeah.
And it's nothing wrong. It's just, when you had 7 clients, you could give them all this time. And now you have 27 clients. You can't do that.
Yeah.
You have to set boundaries. But that's a tunnel. I call it the tunnel of growth, or the tunnel of pain. You have to go through that tunnel, because you have to recognize, I can't actually scale this time frame. Like, if I'm going to give you 3 hours a day, I'm going to have to charge you for 3 hours of time.
Yeah.
And it's hard to think like that when you have 7 clients, but once you get to a point where you have more and more clients, you're like, I need to figure out how to make this system smooth, scalable, and then I have to make sure that I charge adequately for it, and then I got to make sure that I'm not biting off more than I can chew. And that only happens by being like, yep, okay, I have 20 clients. Oh, now I have 40 clients. Oh, yep, that's too much, can't do that. And you just have to learn as you go.
Yeah.
And it also comes down to your bandwidth too, man. Like, I'm single, I don't have kids, I don't have a wife.
That's a good point.
I don't even have roommates, man. I live alone. I don't even have neighbors.
Yeah.
So I'm completely alone. So I can sit here for 9 hours a day, and I love it. I love coaching.
Yeah, I've got, I think we have a mutual colleague, Brett Contreras.
Yeah.
And
math teacher.
This guy's like got some of the highest work rate I've ever seen. This guy's like a monster when it comes to programming and all that kind of stuff. But like if I compare myself to him, I think he gets a little less sleep than I do. I really like my sleep.
Yep.
I also really like doing some things, like my morning routine is a certain way, and you could say like I'm wasting some time with some of the stuff I do in the morning, but it's for me. He's not married. He doesn't have kids. He's in his gym all day. So he's busting out work all dang day.
Yep.
Whereas some coaches might feel bad comparing themselves because maybe they are married, maybe they do have children, whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. It's like everybody's got their own thing, man.
I used to compare myself to all of the industry greats. I was like, man, I'm not as smart as Brett.
Yeah.
I'm not as smart as Eric Cressy. I'm not as good as Mike Boyle. And I would compare myself, and it was just like, wait a second, like I have no desire to work with MLB players like Eric Cressy does. So how can I compare myself? And I don't really like to work with physique competitors like Brett might.
Right.
I've worked with them on like the fitness and resiliency side, but I don't really, that's just not my thing. Yeah. So I had to learn to like stop comparing and be like, well, what do I want to do?
Right.
What am I fulfilled by? What are my values? And I think coaches make that mistake as they don't study their own value system enough. I constantly reevaluate. I'll always ask myself, like, what's occupying my time lately? What's on my brain all the time? What's in my personal space all the time?
Yeah.
What is the major type of book on my bookshelf these days? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm like, all right, like I need to make sure that all of my life is aligning with whatever it is I value the most.
Sure.
When you do that, distress becomes eustress.
Yeah.
Because you can love what you do, but even if you love skydiving, if you skydive 8 hours a day, you're going to burn out. You have to get out of that.
Just like you love training, you can't train all day. You got to have time off. right?
True that. So they say.
Sure.
There's no such thing as overtraining, bruh. It's under recovery. Yeah.
So we talked about like assessment, your assessment process being pretty thorough and very, very much customized to the person, right?
Yeah,
Depending on
like
what they want.
the blood work for the assessment's huge, but also, looking at movement. This is where I actually think movement screens are pretty good. When I think of assessment, is like, at the end of the day, we tend to think biochemistry because we learned all about Krebs cycle and electron transport chain and Cori cycle and phase 1, phase 2 detox, and we forget that the body is electricity. I think we talked about that like 2 years ago. It's like, well, what are you? You're matter held together by electricity, really?
Sure.
So when I look at an air squat, if somebody has a poor air squat, poor quote unquote, my brain goes like, all right, like, if you look like a dog pooping, that might be okay if you're by a campfire roasting some, marshmallows. But if I try to put a heavy bar on your back, that's going to be more stressful on the system. And so that might actually cause more autonomic nervous system stress, so more sympathetic tone, as I would call it, versus like somebody that might squat really well. So I'll use me as an example. I'm a good squatter. I have great squat mechanics. I'm not built to deadlift. And so deadlifting is really, really hard on me. I remember when I was doing Olympic lifting, doing snatch deadlifting to fix my first pull, just doing pulls to the knee and then dropping the bar. At 85% of my power snatch, I would need 3 minutes of rest after a double.
Yeah.
But you could ask me to squat and I would do 405 for sets of 5 back squatting on my E. So after a 2-hour lifting session, I could go back squat 405 for 3 sets of 5 with a 2-minute rest in between. And it was like, I got this because of my mechanics. Yeah. So when I look at mechanics and biomechanics, I think of injuries a little bit because I don't want you to be a soccer player who lands with a valgus knee, right? Like that's injurious for sure, and I want to retrain that and make you resilient. But I also think, hey, if you're not good at squatting and I give you a lot of squats, that's going to age you.
Sure.
That is going to age you rapidly. Yeah. Look at CrossFit. CrossFitters from 5 years ago who still CrossFit, they look older.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And so I think of that, and it's like, all right, I know that this guy, he wants to be an Olympic lifter, or he wants to be a CrossFitter, or I have a lot of tier 1 and tier 2 operators in the SF special operations world, and I'll look at them and I got guys that are 6'5", 230 pounds. They got to sit in a helo for 2 hours as they approach target. And that's not a very comfortable position.
No, not at all.
These guys are constantly in weird, awkward, stressful positions. And if they're not meant to squat very well, if they're not built for it, and I give them more squats, I'm just screwing up their HRV at that point.
Yeah.
And so I might give them less squats. So one guy I can think of, I never make him do volume and squats. On Monday, he'll squat because he's more fresh from the weekend. But it's literally, hey, Bill, do a tough 5, move on. You have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then on Thursday, he squats again, and it's an EMOM speed work. It's like, hey, man, throw some chains on, 50%, EMOM 10 minutes times 3 to 5.
Got it.
Never touches load for volume.
Got it.
And then every maybe 12 weeks, hey, Bill, do a tough single, and he's within 5%, I'm happy. Or if he PRs, I'm happy.
Got it.
But he's in his 40s, so I monitor that. But the dude is built to deadlift. He'll deadlift 550 any day of the week. Yeah. That's just what he does.
How did you figure that out with him? How did you figure out that, hey, this guy's a great deadlifter, but back squatting crushes him? What was that like?
Conversation, hey, how'd that feel, man? Like, dude, like I did 3 reps and I just felt like I needed a nap. But I also looked at his movement. Like I'll actually have clients send me videos of air squats. Show me an air squat. I don't think you necessarily have to do the whole dowel rod over your head, overhead squat thing. Sure. But I'll watch your movement and say, hey, man, like, that looks like that's a tougher movement for you. How does it feel when you load it up? I need a lot of rest between reps, or I got to keep it, lighter.
Yeah.
Got it. And then you just start tracking those trends. And then I started to notice, more and more patterns in the movement screens. Same thing with, like certain shoulder mobility. If you have really poor shoulder mobility and I'm going to ask you to bench press 3 times a week, that might be stressful on your system.
It'd be tough.
Yeah. And then there's energy systems testing that goes into that, looking at, orthostatic challenge, thinking of central governor fatigue versus peripheral fatigue, your heart, when your heart is stationary, like on an assault bike or on like an echo bike or a C2 concept 2 erg bike or whatever, your heart doesn't move. So your stroke volume doesn't change as much. So your cardiac output needs to be a certain amount, but when you're doing burpees, your stroke volume is changing, because when I'm standing upright, gravity is fighting blood return. When I lay down, gravity is not fighting blood return, so my heart rate naturally lowers. That's why we test resting heart rate laying down.
Right.
So if I'm doing this kind of thing and doing burpee box jump overs, that stimulus to the nervous system is very different because of the venous return to the heart.
Sure.
And we'll see HRV values change quite a bit because of that.
Right.
So I'll actually throw fitness tests into that, and I'll say, hey, like, we'll do this thing and we'll do this thing, and what was the hard part about that? And so I'll be able to determine, like, yeah, like, you need to break down orthostatic challenge, and that's why you're struggling with the obstacle course, and that's why selection was so tough for you, or that's why you failed the last selection. So we need to build that out. So when you go back to SFAS, you're ready to rock.
So it sounds like, I mean, obviously it sounds like you've got a lot of different clients. Sounds like your assessment is, you know, pretty, you've got it down pat as far as the kind of person that comes to you. You know how to pick and choose the right assessments for that person, which is, you know, something a lot of people maybe don't realize, or at least maybe from where I come from a little bit more in fitness, the bodybuilding, the powerlifting side of things. Like, people don't think of guys in the special forces as being in the same ballpark, right? Or being in fitness. They only think about, you know, more through their lens. But what do you think a coach can do, maybe who wants to be more multifaceted with their clients as far as who they work with, to build an assessment or build an ability to work with a lot of different kinds of people like you? Yeah,
so I think, like, if you were to look at the common avatar of the human that I would work with, it's the human that is at one point a puzzle. And
somebody who's just gotten stuck, doesn't know what to do next, nobody else can help them.
Yeah, and so what I have found to work for me to be able to do that, because I would think in terms of everything that I read is a book that'll help me be a better coach. So I will read books by environmental...
Dr. Seuss?
Yeah, probably.
Somehow, some way, right?
So I could. You give me a Dr. Seuss book, and I could find a lesson in there for life.
Okay.
Green eggs and ham.
There we go.
Right? Like, there's probably a lesson in life in that one.
So when next time somebody asks me on Instagram what's the best book I can read, I'll just say Green Eggs and Ham.
Possibly. It's a good book.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of, like, you know, I'm very, very fascinated with the idea of, like, detoxification, because all throughout undergrad and grad school, I was told that we all detox just fine.
Yeah, that's a big one, right?
You hear these nutritionists say that there's
liver
no
does everything.
Yeah, which is complete bullshit.
Yeah.
Nutritionists need to get on the level, because they just need to start reading more research.
Got it.
I know that's really blunt of me to say, but
it's all right.
We have enough
Shots
evidence.
fired, folks.
Yeah, we have enough evidence now to show that that's not true.
Yeah.
But I'll read books by environmental medicine doctors on toxicology. I've gone to medical conferences and talked to PhDs in toxicology, and just being like, wow, like, I'm never going to cure that because I'm not a doctor, but just understanding how heavy metals and chemical toxicity and environmental pollutants can impact your health and resiliency changes how I might write a program.
Yeah.
And then, you know, understanding how to interpret it in blood work.
Looking at where that person lives, what their occupation is, what they're exposed to, like all that stuff matters, right?
We have research now that shows us that there's a higher prevalence of disease and cancer in people that live near airports.
Yeah.
There's higher pesticide rates in people that live near golf courses.
Yeah.
And so that impacts a lot of stuff like pain and performance and fitness. I think you won't see it as much in, like, the bodybuilding world, because bodybuilding is a different type of world. Yeah. As intensity goes up, metabolic intensity goes up, you're going to see more and more issues. Yeah. So CrossFit and tactical worlds, you see that a lot more than you would in, like, physique, I think, which is why I think a lot of nutritionists don't get it, because they just don't live in the world where they have to see that.
Yeah.
But in terms of coaches being able to be more broad spectrum, you know, read everything. Read books on toxicology. Read everything by Shirley Rogers. Detoxify or Die, Pain Free in 6 Weeks, Death by Dioxins. Read those books. Go read the research. Read up on Brian Walsh. Brian Walsh had a ton of stuff on detoxification. Go read all the stuff he's talked about, and then go take his courses. He's done online courses for clinicians with lots and lots and lots
Brian
of
Walsh,
research.
you said, yeah?
Yeah, Brian Walsh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is his background? Do you know?
A naturopathic medical doctor.
Okay. There you
go. And I believe he was a strength coach prior.
Okay.
So, like, look into his stuff. Start looking at John Sarno's work. Start looking into psychosomatic medicine and recognizing that pain is not just movement.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes clients might think it is because they correlate, I squat, my knee hurts, but we got to recognize that there's more to that. So read books by John Sarno, read The Body Keeps the Score. As hippie as the guy is, read up on Paul Chek's stuff.
Yeah.
How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. That book is a classic. Like, read that.
Yeah.
You know, read up on gut health. You know, there's a weird thing where a lot of in the functional fitness world and in the tactical world, we have a lot more money in that, like, tactical world now, where we know that, like, gut health is a big deal for performance and fitness. I think it's not known as much in the physique world because
Probably
it's like,
not, no. I mean, especially the people I work with,
yeah,
I've never heard of it.
If it fits your macros, bro.
Yeah.
And I think generally that probably is true because when you're younger, which is your general avatar of a physique competitor, usually, there's more resiliency, right? Like when you're 20, you can kind of just eat what you want and get away with it.
Right.
You can't do that at 47.
You haven't filled your cup, so to speak, of everything you've been exposed to.
Totally, man. So I think, like, if coaches in that world wanted to learn more about gut health, go read up on all of the stuff on the microbiome, the gut balance revolution, the good gut. Go read up on Perlmutter's work. You know, read all of those books, and then be open to the idea that, like, nobody is smart enough to be wrong 100% of the time. There's always a partial truth to everything.
Smart enough to be right 100% of the time.
Smart enough to be wrong. Ken Wilber said that. In The Theory of Everything, he wrote a textbook or a book called The Theory of Everything. He said nobody is smart enough to be wrong 100% of the time.
Explain that. What does that mean?
It means that there's a partial truth to everything.
Got it.
So whatever you say, something is going to be wrong.
Sure.
My job is to find out what that is. And whatever I say, I will be wrong about something.
Interesting.
And I'm totally okay with that. My job is to find out where I'm wrong and to keep removing those things where I'm wrong so I can grow.
But that's like a constant process, right? You're never going to remove all the wrong.
No, I'll never. I'll never, ever, because I will always be fallible.
The more you learn, the more you can get wrong, right?
Yeah, totally. But that's where I think, like, you know, go read up on, you know, even genetics, man. Like, go read The Biology of Belief. Go read about the science of telomeres and how we recognize now that you can actually change telomere length just through lifestyle. Yeah. Read Ben Lynch's book, Dirty Genes. You know, all those books are fantastic at opening your eyes to it's a lot more than calories in, calories out.
Yeah,
that's
very true.
It's a lot more than just DUP.
Sure.
You know, I think if coaches start doing that and they start to think about patterns, what I recommend, highlight whatever it is you already know. Highlight what you do. Stop looking for the things stop looking for the secret squirrel sauce. Start highlighting the stuff like, actually, I already knew that and did that. I'm going to highlight that one.
Yeah.
Because you'll start to recognize patterns and principles. And when you recognize principles, you can work with anyone.
You can learn anything. You can do anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for those who have listened so far, you might be feeling a little intimidated by how much knowledge this guy has, and don't feel bad because I'm sitting here just as intimidated as I always am about Michael and his knowledge. But one thing I admire about you is your ability to constantly be hungry to learn. You're always wanting to learn new things. You consume a vast amount of, I don't know how many books you've already dropped the name of on this podcast so far. There's always a new one that's on your Amazon shopping list. What fuels you? What drives you to keep learning like that?
Asperger's.
Yeah?
To be honest with you. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, man. I only found out a few years ago that I'm on the spectrum. But there's something about, have you ever seen The Accountant with Ben Affleck, right?
Yeah, great movie.
That scene where in the very beginning of the movie, he's putting the puzzle together and he loses that last piece and he flips out.
Flips out, yeah. Can't take it.
That is me when I don't understand something.
Yeah.
Like if something is not clicking, or if I'm working with a client and something's not working, I'll stay up till 2 a.m. just reading research after research, study after study, book after book. I will text message doctors I know all over the world. Hey, help me out here. Like, I'm thinking this. Like, can you give me some ideas of where I should go? I can't stop. Like, it's a level of like OCD.
Yeah.
So when I see patterns that don't do this,
don't fit.
I become very obsessed with it. I read a textbook a few years ago in like 2 weeks because I couldn't solve a problem. So I like read through this textbook in 2 weeks, and then I figured a lot of stuff out of it, and then everything calmed down again. Just like in that movie, he gets the puzzle piece, and he's like,
yeah.
So
now you can relax.
That's how my mind works. Yeah. So my mind doesn't really stop. There's a lot of detriments to that, obviously. Like there's a lot of ability and disability that comes with it. So
Sure.
I struggled a lot growing up. I didn't really ever belong anywhere. I was always kind of the weird one. I spent most of my time alone. I'm obviously very comfortable alone because no neighbors, live alone, no roommates, no girlfriend, nothing. I definitely always struggled with that stuff, but that's kind of where my hunger comes from, just wanting to solve the puzzle.
Yeah.
And there's a level of ego that comes to it. Like
Sure.
I do enjoy like the masculine accomplishment of being like, yes, I fixed it.
Yeah.
I figured it out. Like
Yeah.
there's a level of ego that hits there. And as Kenny Weiss, well, you know Kenny.
I know Kenny.
Yeah, so Kenny.
Shout out to Kenny Weiss.
Yeah, great book, Your Journey to Success.
Yep.
I give that book to almost every client that's struggling with anything in life. But Kenny, you know, he told me a couple of years back, one, Kenny is probably one of the most influential mentors of my life, not because he taught me stuff, but he gave me ideas of where to research. And I think good mentors give you ideas versus teachers teach. He just like said things and would mention things for me to research. He just messaged me on Instagram the other day, hey, I saw your book post. You might want to buy this book too. So he gave me the tools to go learn on my own.
Right.
But Kenny said that, you know, it's okay to live through your traumas, because I was traumatized a lot as a child for different things, and we all are. Every human being has been traumatized.
Yeah.
But for me, it was learning to live through my trauma in a positive outlook. So for the rest of my life, all I really care about is loving as many people as I can, being there to help as many people as I can. And, you know, the ego part is like, yeah, man, like I get an ego boost out of it because it feels good.
Yeah.
But also it's like, I got to make sure that I use my gifts to
help
leave the
others.
world better than when I found it.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
What are you working on with your own fitness right now? What are your goals?
Honestly, so I just ran like a gazillion things in my blood work last Friday. I ran everything from full thyroid to full, you know, kidney and liver, full hormone panel. I have everything that you could possibly order. And I'm waiting for the results. I have everything back except for like 2 things. And I'm really trying to gear my fitness up to help me be as healthy as possible. Because I was traveling for quite a bit. In the last 4 months, I think I took 8 17-hour flights.
Wow.
And it was really stressful. Yeah. In the last year and a half, 2 years, I've probably taken maybe upwards of like 2 dozen, maybe even 3 dozen 17-hour flights.
Yeah.
Like I've been all over the world in the last
People don't
couple
think
of
about
years.
how that kind of stuff, even if it's just for vacation, right? People don't think about how that can impact them.
Oh, it's so toxic to fly. I mean, one, you're 5 miles up, so you have less atmosphere, so more radiation.
Radiation from the sun.
Aluminum does not protect you from that.
Absolutely not.
Jet fuel is very oxidatively stressful.
Sure.
Recycled
All of the recycled air.
viruses and bacteria, so there's
Going
oxidative
through,
stress there.
going through security.
Yeah,
getting exposed
radiation
to the
from that.
X-ray
You have
radiation.
EMF on planes.
Sure.
That we now have evidence
Super
that,
concentrated in the cabin. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So, you know, I really made myself unhealthy traveling the world, you know. I thought it'd be cool. I lectured all over. I have my own continuing education seminar, but it really messed me up. So my fitness goal now is really to just get myself healthy, because someday I think I'd like, you know, well, no, I don't think. I know someday I really want to be married and have a family. Okay. That is a very big life goal of mine. But
you have to be resilient.
Well, yeah. So resiliency is interesting because you could have low perception. I got this one from James Fitzgerald, actually, like in terms of how he worded it. And I think he worded it so beautifully well that I just stole it from him. But I'll give him credit because it's definitely something that he said first. Low perception and low awareness or low perception and the resiliency up, like that's good. So like, because of the way my mind is wired, I could go 36 hours without sleep and it sucks, but like I can still do stuff.
Yeah.
So I was able to push through all that type of flying and
not notice what was going on.
Yeah, but it dug me a hole. So like one day, like for me to, you know, have a wife and to have kids, I need to be the best man I can be. And part of that is being healthy enough to be mentally acute with them, to be able to provide, protect, and, you know, serve them. So I really want to get myself as healthy as possible. So I've been working on that. And so far the results show that my kidneys are really taxed. I've got a lot of renal insufficiency.
Got it.
So doing a lot of cool herbal Chinese medicine things for my kidneys. So that's my goal for my fitness right now. I mean, I like being jacked. I like looking good naked, obviously. Like,
Sure.
I like to be.
That's probably everybody's goal. Let's be honest.
Yeah. So like I like being lean. I'm around like maybe 8-9% body fat right now.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. I like being strong. I do a lot of aerobic work. I try to run, at least 3 or 4 times a week, just easy intervals. And I love bench pressing. My nervous system's a little taxed, so I do a lot more pushing than I do pulling.
Got it.
Pushing is a lot less taxing. Like bench pressing is less hard on your nervous system than deadlifting.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why powerlifters can bench press 3-4 times a week, no problem.
Totally.
They can't deadlift 3-4 times a week.
Exactly. And that's where, when I look at blood work as well, sodium-potassium ratio, I can tell you based on your labs what kind of movement patterns you probably need to be doing more of. So right
Based
now,
on what you're looking like, how taxed you're looking,
totally,
what's going on, yeah.
Yeah, on top of a movement assessment as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So like right now, lots of bench pressing, lots of pushing, more single leg stuff. Like I'll do rear foot elevated split squats with 100 to 110 pounds per hand for 5 to 10 reps. So I'll do that instead of heavy back squats. No loading of the spine right now.
Yeah.
Just doing a lot of bench, split squats, doing a lot of like curls, calf raises, a lot of row repeats.
Got it.
Stuff to make
General
me ready
fitness,
for next summer.
Strong, fit,
Yeah.
in shape, cardiovascular wise, looking good, all that stuff.
Yeah. My one thing I like is to be very powerful and fast. Speed to me is my thing. Like I would rather be speedy than powerful, and I'd rather be more speedy than strong. So I'm okay having a 405 pound back squat. In the strength world, that's child's play, but it's strong enough for me, and I know that I'm very fast. And like I've done martial arts since I was 5, so maybe 4 or 5. And my brother was just in town, and he's 53, and he always beat up on me, and he's done martial arts his entire life too. And the fact that when I was 16, he kicked my ass. He beat the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And I told him, I was like, one day I'm going to be able to get you, and I'm going to be able to beat you. I'm going to be better than you. And I was so obsessed because it's a puzzle I couldn't solve. So I obsessed over training and being fast. And so kind of like how some people need to have like a certain bench press number or else they feel like not good.
Yeah.
If I don't feel fast, I feel very not okay. If I can't sprint 20 meters and then have quick hands and quick reflexes, I don't feel like myself. So speed is a big thing for me too.
Cool, man. Dude, I think that we could keep talking forever. I'd like to have you on again because I feel like we've only scratched the surface of everything we could talk about.
I want to come on with Jeff.
Yeah, in
Dr.
fact,
Bann?
I'm going to have Dr. Barron on,
Yeah.
so we'll do a second one, which is we'll have both of you on at the same time. I'll have to get some new mics actually because I don't have the equipment for that yet, but we'll get another one.
I'll bring some bourbon because that's what Jeff and I do.
There we go, and then we'll get some steaks afterwards.
Absolutely.
So where can people find you, man? What resources do you have available for people, and where can they find you?
They can always find me on Instagram. That's probably the best way to reach me is just coach_Michael_Bann.
Okay.
You could email me at michaelbann@thebigdogs.com, and dogs is DAWGS.
Okay.
I work for Big Dogs, obviously, which is a subsidiary company of OPEX Management Corporation. So
awesome.
So you can always email me there, but honestly, usually the best way is Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Slide into my DMs.
You mentioned earlier having some courses that you do. What do those look like for people who are interested?
Yeah, so I've had a continuing education course that I created. Basically, I teach coaches how to be more broad spectrum in their assessment process.
Cool. So those of you who were impressed by his assessment and all the things he's been talking about, you can learn straight from him.
Yeah. I basically talk at you for 9 hours, 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
And then usually I genuinely love to teach. I mean, one of the things about Asperger's is I just love to talk at people.
Yeah. That's why I just let you go whenever I ask you questions. For those of you maybe thinking like, why isn't Andres talking? Because I just enjoy listening to this guy talk. He's got so much good stuff to say.
Well, thank you. But I do like to take the people out to dinner that, when they do go to my seminar or my course, it's kind of like, hey, can we all go to dinner and just shoot the shit? And I'm a first name basis guy. I hate being called coach. And like when I eventually, because I'm traveling a lot these days, like when I go back to school for my second graduate degree and I have my doctorate, I'll never let anybody call me doctor. I'm very much like yo, Michael. Or good. Michael Bann. Most people call me Michael Bann. They don't call me Michael.
I think I'm one of the only people that you let call you Mike.
Yeah, you and like maybe a handful, like less than 5 others.
It's because I snuck in before back in the anatomy days and I started calling you Mike.
I was Mike back then.
Yeah,
then I grew up, I guess.
I guess so. Cool, man. Well, like I said, it's a pleasure to have you on,
Yeah,
dude.
thank you.
We got to do this again. I'll probably have you on multiple times because there's always a new learning to be had.
Yeah, man. I'd love, anytime. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man.